In this video, we'll discuss the features on Clancy Brown's face that point to a likely compassionate nature, as well as a strong will. Enjoy. In today's face reading video, we've got Clancy Brown. So Clancy Brown is a very famous actor. He was well known for playing the Kurgan in the Highlander movie with Christopher Lambert. Great movie from the 80s. I highly recommend to watch that movie if you've never seen it. He's sort of terrifying in that movie. He's very good at playing intimidating roles. He was also very good in The Shawshank Redemption. There's lots of movies that he's been in. In any case, a few people had asked that I read Clancy Brown, and I think he's a good read because he has very dominant features. This is what I would call a face that's easier to read. In general, faces that are a bit more homogeneous and averaged out in terms of dominance, in terms of features, I would say collectively are harder to read. There's a lot more digging you have to do in terms of life terrain assessment to figure out what's good for the person, what's not good for the person. And so with dominant features, I enjoy reading dominant features on people because it makes the process a tad easier. And it's not about making it easier, but there's just more overt things to look at. Clancy Brown is a prime example. So the first thing I want to talk about regarding Clancy Brown is the nature of Jing. Jing is our constitutional essence. It is our genetic expression, the connection to our ancestral energy, how well the gifts of the past and our genetic heritage and our historical family bloodline, how well that energy expresses in the present. That all relates to Jing. We can see it in our bone structure. We can see it in terms of how a person ages, in terms of the body and whatnot. People with strong Jing typically keep their hair longer. They typically have bigger bone structure. They typically can color outside the lines a lot more. They can be the grandparent who drinks a lot of whiskey every day and eats bacon for breakfast and lives to be 100. So, that being said, if you look at Clancy Brown's face, you're going to see that he's got big dominant bone structure. He's got a long face. His skull looks large. He's got a nice strong jaw. He's got a dominant nose. He's got a prominent brow bone. These are all big bony protrusions in the sense of Jing. So what I would say is that Clancy Brown is of an era of humans that the more you rewind time a little bit, the more dominant bone structure is. And this is sort of my ongoing working theory about Jing and whatnot, is that if you look at like World War II vets and you look at their faces, and you go back even 50, 100 years, people's bone structures were a lot more dominant. Things were longer. There was more space between the features, longer philtrums, longer faces, bigger ears. Clancy Brown sort of falls into this, and I think, and this happens, as time goes on, the more environmental toxins we have in our environment, the more stressors that humans have to engage in terms of the external, things outside in our world that poison us, essentially, or that stress us, it's going to impact Jing. So many of you have probably heard the fertility crisis that's happening around the world. A lot of people are having trouble with fertility. And part of that in the big collective Chinese medicine marker is Jing. Jing is diminishing. So when we see a big dominant bone structure, we're looking at someone who's got a lot of Jing. One of the things that I would be telling Clancy Brown if I was working with him in his younger days, people with a lot of Jing, they can color outside the lines. They can do more. They can eat more. They can party more. And so with that, you could say, well, if a person has very strong Jing in their face, because face reading theory says what you have to use it, that you've got to use your Jing. We're all using our Jing, but what I tell people who have very strong Jing, the thing I say to them and I reiterate to them is be very careful, because what happens with people who have a lot of Jing is they will overuse it, not pay attention to their health, drink, party, and burn the candle from both ends until their 50s or 60s. And if they have not tended to life nourishment, they haven't learned how to regulate their life force, they haven't learned how to manage those things, shit hits the fan really hard at that age. And they get sick very fast, and there's a very rapid decline. And their latter years, even though they have a lot of Jing, can be very crummy. They can be very, very unpleasant years if we haven't taken care of these things. So what I tell people who have very strong Jing is, as I say, you're very lucky in that you have a lot of Jing. It's very important. It's one of the things that will allow you to live a long, healthy life. And if you have strong Jing, I really encourage those people, as hard as it is, because you're not going to feel much until you're about 65 or so, nourish your life force. Hone in on your diet, hone in on your biological rhythms, get your sleep in order, exercise, sauna, do those things, because if you do, you are so ahead of the curve. But what I found over the years is people that have very strong Jing typically don't do that. And even though they technically could live a longer life because they live a bit rougher, they have shorter lives sometimes. So what I would say to someone who has very strong Jing is really tend to it, because you're sitting on a winning lottery ticket. So we can see some pretty strong wood metrics in Clancy Brown in terms of the length of the face. When we see this long nature in a face, what they call the horse face, or someone who's got long features, where they have a long philtrum, a lot of space between the lip here and the jaw, long forehead, long nose, long face, this is all pointing to the verticality of wood, because wood grows up. So tree trunk is narrow, bushy at the top, but wood grows slowly, and it's long, and it's vertical. And so this is where we see those wood metrics. So we're looking at the liver. When someone has a lot of wood, they can overuse the liver. This can mean a lot of drinking. This can mean a lot of things because they want to move energy in the liver. I don't know if Clancy Brown had issues with alcohol or anything like that. I didn't do any backstory on him. I'm just reading his face kind of cold. So that's one. He's got a dominant brow bone. These are also wood metrics. So the liver is about drive. It's about pushing through, chasing your dreams, vigor, tenacity. It can also be anger and aggression on the negative side. So the wood is it's a very important element in the sense that the liver regulates the free flow of emotion in the body. If the liver gets bogged down and our emotional terrain gets bogged down, that really has a negative impact on the mind, okay, and the spirit. So people with strong livers and a lot of wood, they've really got to pay attention to this. The other kind of roundabout thing I tell people with a lot of wood is assess your dream time, okay? Read some Carl Jung. Read about lucid dreaming. The reason I say that is because when we dream and when we go to bed, Chinese medicine says that our ethereal spirit, okay? I'll give you a little breakdown here. I don't want to get too deep into theory. The 5 elements and the emotional expressions that come out of that, each of the 5 elements house these components of will. Okay, willpower is stored in the kidneys. The lungs, they harness like nostalgia and our relationship to the past. So you can go through each of these elements and they have a thing that they do. The spleen regulates intent. It's called the yi. So the way they think of it is the soul, or the light of the spirit, comes into a human being and then it refracts like a prism sort of into 5 different permutations. And the 5 elements are sort of like 5 different flavors of soul expression to a degree. The liver, though, at night houses the ethereal soul. The ethereal soul relates to dream time. So this is where it gets a little metaphysical. The astral projection, when people do these practices of going outside the body and sort of trying to navigate dream time to figure things out or to be more lucid in their time. Dream time is important because when we're sleeping, our dreams are how we process reality. It's the subconscious symbolism of what we're going through. This is why dreams can be very weird and symbolic. So people with a lot of wood, what I say is get your sleep in order and pay attention to your sleep. It's very important. And the more you can actively dream, and there are methods to do that. That's a whole different video. But the more you can dream, the more it helps regulate the liver. It's a way you can sort of tend to the liver outside of your waking life, because you've got to exercise, you've got to breathe, you've got to move your blood to exercise that. Now, the other thing that's dominant in him are the hooded eyes. He's got very interesting eyes. So with the hooded eyes, as I've talked about before, when we have this, okay, the eyes are the portal to the soul, the gateway to the mind. And so when we see this hooded feature, there's sort of a protection. There's a hiding, a sheltering. It's sort of like we hide in this sheltered space a little bit. That can express a lot of different ways. Sometimes it can be white lying, right? Hiding a little bit. But it can also be a person who weathers the trials of father time very well. As we age, the hooded eyes, what I've seen is those people usually have a bit more shelter in terms of the difficulties of life. They have a way to do this. The other thing you can see with this is that they are compassionate. With that hooded thing, it's like a person who is staying out of the sun, not being made irritable by the summer heat. They can stay in the shade and they can sort of surveil the scene of life a bit better. So with Clancy Brown, those eyes definitely point to those metrics. I would be inquiring to him, like, have you lived like this? What's your relationship to this? Tell me how you navigate your life. And I would be looking for those things, because in theory, if he were to play to those things and be a bit more of a the observer in the cave that has those sheltered eyes, the person that can hide a bit more, I would say that's favorable for you. That's something I would be paying attention to. Now, his eyes are interesting also because it looks like in some of the pictures, his eyes sort of drift out a little bit. There's sort of the eyes have a little bit of this, not a lazy eye, but they sort of drift out. When we see that, when the eyes drift out, they talk about the peripheral awareness. Human beings are mammals and we are predators. That's why we've hunted animals since the beginning of time. We are frontal-eyed creatures, which means we are predatory. Tigers are like this. Eagles are like this. If you look at predatory apex predators, they have frontal vision because they target things in the environment and go after it. Humans are like this. If you look at the animals, like the ruminant animals, like cows, deer, sheep, their eyes are offset because why? They're looking to the environment for predators, things that can kill them. So when the eyes do this in humans, it's sort of a softer nature sometimes. Their energy can run a bit more towards that, like an animal of prey, like a cow, something that is a little bit slower in its demeanor, that's not going to be attacking as much. That doesn't mean he shouldn't eat meat or that he shouldn't, do the things that humans do. But it means that disposition in the spirit can definitely be there, sort of a softer approach. I've also noticed this, people who have these eyes sometimes are prone to vegetarianism. I'm not here to make judgments about vegetarian or eating meat or any of that, but I found that people that are compassionate, oftentimes when they have these eyes that go out a little bit, there's a compassionate bent. You can sort of think, your chances of survival of hanging out with a cow or a tiger, your chances are better with the cow. They're a softer, more peaceful animal to a degree. They're not attacking and killing things per se. So these are metrics that I would be talking to him about in the big picture, about his life and whatnot. The last thing I'll talk about is the chin. He's got a pretty dominant chin in the sense that it's definitely wide, but it also juts out, and he's got this strong jaw. When we see this, that strong chin, that relates to willpower. Okay, that's regulated by the water element and the kidney system. That strong willpower is very important because will and getting through life, we have to have that. A lot of living a long time is the will. Quick side note, in martial arts in China, there's 3 primary systems, Xingyi, Bagua, and Tai Chi. I've studied all of these. Classically, Xingyi is the most linear and it's the most direct, and it's about harnessing the willpower. The reason they teach that system first is because if you don't have strong willpower, you will not have the will to live. Then from there, when you learn that direct energy, you go into Bagua, which is very circular. It's a beautiful art. If you've never looked up Bagua, B-A-G-U-A, go online, go on YouTube. Absolutely beautiful to watch. One of my favorite martial arts and incredibly good for the body. Then you go to Tai Chi, which sort of blends the two. But the point is willpower. They stress willpower first because it's so important for living a long time. The last piece I'll touch on here is that the fact that he has this long rectangular face, this is what they call even distribution of Jing throughout a life. So if a person is very bottom heavy in terms of girth and their face is wider at the bottom and narrow at the top, this means that the old age is usually a bit more robust. If a person is very top heavy, like a Nikola Tesla, there's more energy in the youth and they have to be careful as they age because things can really quiet down and energy can diminish. He's got one of those faces that, according to face reading theory, if he takes care of himself, his allocation of how his Jing distributes throughout his life is very good. The rectangular face is the one that has the even distribution of Jing. Doesn't mean if you're doomed, if you have a top-heavy or a bottom-heavy face, nothing like that. You don't want to think of it. All of these shapes come with pros and cons, but what's nice for him is there's sort of an even distribution. There's sort of a steady state cardio that he's going to get to keep through his life. And if he plays to that, and he does that well, it's a very good thing. Okay, this is actually the last thing because this just came to mind. When the eyes drift out like this, when they look out, the other thing is that the spirit of the person sometimes doesn't pay attention to what's in front of them. And as such, the way this manifests in face reading theory is that they can sometimes make crummy decisions. They can be a little sloppy with personal choices in terms of what they choose to do, how they choose to do it. And a lot of times because their eyes and the spirit do this a little bit and those eyes drift, they sort of miss what's in front of them. So again, I would be asking him, is this true in your life? And moreover, what was your relationship to it? And to not resist that. What we label as bad decisions and whatnot, the person might experience it that way, but in the end, a lot of us learn the most through mistakes. So there's sort of like a soft, compassionate evolution that can come with these kinds of eyes. Again, I would be asking him, has this been true for you? And if you're not doing that, and if you haven't taken that perspective, if you adopt it, chances are your life force is going to express better. So that's all I've got for Clancy Brown. If you guys have questions, please put them down below. If there's someone else you'd like me to read, please put them down below. Thanks for your time. Take care.